All right, welcome back to Getting Past the Premium, everybody. Today, I'm excited to have a guest who's been on before, Casey Schrader with Oswald, and I'm excited because this is going to be a fun conversation to see how they've continued to evolve their process and what they're doing. And we just jumped right in, so we'll be having some fun with this one. So, hope everybody enjoys, and we'll talk soon.
2024 was a good year. I think it was challenging for a lot of people, including the clients that we all have. I mean,
Yeah.
the in the private equity world, the deal flow was certainly down, and I think that there was a lot of trepidation around the former administration, the now current administration, to understand how the tea leaves, to read those and see how they were going to change. And the early part of the administration now seems like there's going to be a lot of activity, and so that's going to certainly change how, especially in places in the country where you and I both live, where manufacturing for us in Ohio is worth, probably 30+% of the economy. So tariffs is a large part of the discussion, and I sense will continue to be for the next number of years. And so it was good, but there was a lot of concern at best about what this year and subsequent years after that was going to look like. And so, yeah, relative to on the go forward, I think it's interesting. We live in a generation now where you and I are dealing with uh, second, third, maybe even fourth generation business owners if they last that long, and many of them are our vintage. And I think with that comes a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of conversations I'm having with people that are our age that are probably third gen if they're family owned, and the relationships that their family had as far as advisors are concerned. Perhaps they're more willing and open to evaluate those. And it's an interesting thought, and you and I both agree on this, that we can't force anybody to hire us.
Mhm.
And in our world, somebody has to ultimately get fired so we can get hired. And I'm in no position by any means of telling somebody that that 30+ year relationship that they have should be terminated just because there's something bright, new, and shiny out there, and just because time has elapsed and it's run its course, that they ought to hire somebody brand new. So where you and I agree is there's a lot of the conversations that I've been having coming candidly just from the perspective of diligence, and that in light of what just happened in November and the president confirming a lot of his advisory cabinet, I think in many ways that's how you and I like to look at look at ourselves inside of how we help serve our clients. Is we're inside of an advisory cabinet for somebody. You've got attorneys and you've got accountants. You're paying them, probably a large sum of money or a chunk of money in terms of a retainer. Well, we're in the same kind of boat, and oftentimes, even for family businesses or privately held businesses, even public businesses, there's a duty of care to evaluate those partnerships and due diligence on those relationships. We don't always like to go through that process
Mhm.
and be, held with our feet to the fire, but I think it's a good exercise for businesses to do. So the perspective that I'm approaching many of these opportunities now is, when's the last time you've done any kind of diligence on your partnerships, and what did that look like, and what is something that you hope to accomplish in going through that? And typically what I hear is crickets. Many of the partnerships that people have, they've been long tenured for a reason. People, they're doing business with people that they trust, and someone who a bona fide partner that really knows their business. But in a lot of ways, people are uncomfortable having those kinds of evaluation and sort of validation conversations on those partnerships. So I've had a lot of success in just approaching it like that. I don't know if a partnership is right with somebody, but we're going to work, perhaps together to see where there might be some alignment, and if there's a need to disrupt the long-term partnership and start doing business with someone, meaning us, to help them manage risk in a little bit different way and extract better ROI out of the partnership. So the content that I've been doing lately, it's been largely centered around, demystifying insurance, because I think people have a bad taste in their mouth about it. I mean, however many bees are behind the wildfires in California and, North Carolina hurricanes and Florida and all that kind of stuff, people just have a sour taste and a lack of understanding of how it works. And so just trying to help change the narrative and perspective around how we're viewed has been the aim.
Yeah. Okay, so that was gold. So Cam, this would be a good spot to cut and put in our ad because I'll come back and do the intro. But let's keep rolling because that was awesome. Um, so you talked about being an advisor. We get a lot in talking to firms and such that everybody thinks about that term differently. It even scares some folks in the industry, traditional producers, to think of themselves as an advisor. Like, what does that mean? So when you say that, what seat are you looking to sit at it for the client when you say advisor?
Well, within that advisory cabinet, most people expect their attorney and their accountants to be completely agnostic and bring them thoughts, guidance, insight, even if it's not related to the service that they provide to the business, to help someone insulate their balance sheet from risk, which I think is what we're trying to do. Sometimes you do it in the form of transferring risk to an insurance carrier. It's clearly a way that many people do it. In other ways, there's opportunities to help someone manage risk differently inside of their business. So, specifically to the comment about family-owned businesses or privately held businesses, how many conversations do you and I get into, or have we gotten into over the years, where you have a privately held business that doesn't have a board of advisors?
Hmm.
And certainly they don't have a board of directors, but let alone a board of advisors. Well, to understand why and how that might be helpful to coordinate decisions within the overall scope of the perpetuation of the business, and how we might be able to connect dots. Larry Linney would hopefully smile if he hears this, that when you look at the ROI that somebody gets out of a partnership with us or with you guys or someone else, and the example of somebody pays 100 grand in insurance, 85% of that goes to a carrier to set aside for operating and administrative costs, your claims, somebody else's claims, and their profit. The other 15 points go to us to do a job. Within that 15 grand, I think there's 7 or 8 things that are outlined that should be responsibilities that we take on as advisors to help illuminate to them areas where they might be falling short and how they're managing risk within their business. And that could be legal, that could be finance. We're not attorneys, we're not accountants, but certainly we know what good looks like, and we know things that perhaps they're falling short that correlate to risk on their balance sheet that we're handling with the transfer risk to an insurance carrier. So I hate the word broker, and many of our peers, they refer to themselves as brokers. And in my mind, brokering is an activity. It's something that happens
Yep.
once a year, where we're trying to negotiate with a trading partner, an insurance carrier, Travelers, Chubb, whoever it is, to make sure that we achieve and accomplish the best terms, the best conditions, and the best pricing. And clearly, that's an outcome that many people want. They want the best insurance advisor, and they want the best price, terms, and conditions. Well, that's just one part of the equation. The other part of the equation, in terms of advisor, goes beyond brokering. It has to do with understanding someone's industry vertical and the things that are out there that are brand new. And they may not be entirely tied to insurance at all, but helping them identify those things and figuring out what to do with those, and deploying resources that we either have internally or ones with partner firms that we know really well that can help them manage that risk before they transfer to the insurance carrier. So, and in a sense, I think it's just really holding ourselves to a way different standard, to where we expect that someone is going to look at our partnership annually and say, I pay you $15,000 in the form of a retainer, because that's how the standard, in that
Hmm.
example of that 100 grand premium. How much ROI did I get out of that partnership this year? And we expect that we'll be graded in a scorecard in that way, and that the partnership will be fruitful.
Yeah. Well, I think so. I love that perspective, and I think I can tell that, or I would imagine you're having that conversation with prospects as well to help them delineate the difference and evaluate maybe their current relationship in that light. And so take a step back in the process. Then, how are you? going about getting those opportunities so that you can start having those conversations? What's your lead gen process look like?
Well, I think it's multidimensional. I
Yeah.
think the phones have been good to me, and I've told you this over the years, and
Yeah.
others that internally at Oswald and other places throughout the country, and other producers that you talk to. The phone's been really good to me, and I'll never ever put it down. And for those that say the phone's dead, I think that it's just their unwillingness to refine the process of being good at calling somebody out of the blue and trying to set a meeting with them. So I
Yeah.
think that's all it is. I think truly people aren't willing to be honest with themselves about what that actually looks like. So I'd say that that's part of it, but it's multidimensional. So you mentioned some of the content that I've been putting out on LinkedIn and other places. I think you've got to have a general mix of things. So prospecting via the phone is important, but before you actually get to that point, some of the videos that I've been recording internally and topics and just maybe some series that I've been putting together, using that and putting it into our CRM, and it goes out to a group of prospects, whether it's my manufacturing prospects or my construction prospects, and it's tailored messages. They're very, I'd say the content is uh, vanilla in a
Mhm.
way that it's not too specific to pigeonhole who it's who it can speak to in terms of the overall process. And I mentioned demystifying insurance because there's a lot of that I try to do. But hopefully that content or other white papers or other articles or other things that I'm putting out there into the universe and to those people, when I call them, at the minimum, they might recognize that they're getting content from me or they're getting things from me. They see my name. And I think maybe people are right in the way that gone are the days that cold calling, meaning reaching out, reaching out to somebody cold they've never seen you before, isn't that fruitful of an exercise. Warm calling, warm prospecting is something that we all try to achieve.
Yeah.
And again, you can certainly do that by speaking at events
Yep.
and holding events to where people see your content, because at
Get
the
on
end of the day,
stages. Yep.
yeah, totally. And you would agree with this, that all I'm trying to do through any of those opportunities, any of those mediums, is create credibility.
Yes.
That's all. Because if, I think gone are the days in today's buying cycle, not to say that relationship and product selling isn't important, but I think we've surpassed that stage to where if somebody's going to give you time, the asset of time, which is the most valuable asset, in exchange for that, there's got to be some kind of value. So that means that you got to teach them perhaps something about your business, their business, or the combination of both that enables you to gain some sort of mind share for them to invite you in and allow you to take up 30 minutes of their time or 60 minutes of their time to even talk about evaluation of their partnership and whether it's in the right place or not. So that's all I'm trying to do
Yeah.
is create credibility in a way that somebody's at least willing to entertain a conversation. I don't know if we're the right fit. We're not the right fit for everybody. But at the minimum, we're just trying to find out whether there's alignment or not.
Yep. Yeah, and I would totally agree with all of that. I'd be curious to see if you've been using your content this way as well, that we found some value in. But um, I think too often people look at either cold calling content or anything like that as they give up on it too early, right? Even cold calling. If I don't get Casey to get me a meeting right away, all right, I'm not going to call him for another year. Where I think that seems to me where things are going is like you're going to cold call to build a relationship with Casey over the next 1 to 2 years, probably. And then we've found a lot of success in using the content that you're building as follow-ups or as key touch points where once I have a conversation, you might tell me like, nope, I'm good. Got a buddy that's been handling it forever. Great. Well, then in a month, I might be like, hey, Casey, we just wrote this white paper on the top 7, whatever in construction. Wanted to share it with you. Does this stuff resonate with you? Let me know if you find value or not. No, I'm not asking for anything. Because I'm just showing value and credibility, to use the word that you did, right? I'm letting this person know that we're deeply ingrained in this space. We're experts. We have the right credibility to ask you at some point for that time. And so it's not just about the content you throw up on social or wherever. You can use that in a more strategic fashion in a lot of cases to build and deepen that relationship and get that credibility.
Yeah, and I don't know this guy well, but Micah
Yeah.
Salas, I mean, obviously he's really his content spot on, for anybody that listens to this. And Micah, if you hear this as well, I know you very little, but anybody, he's worth a follow
Yeah.
because it's really spot on. And my sense is that he uses that exact strategy. And you're right, Elliot. I think that the clients that I've gotten over the years, after I've probably made, I don't even know how many calls, countless calls, 40, 50, 60, and how many times I've had a conversation that the timing's not right, the timing's not right, the timing's not right. But, as humans, we know that even though you took a blood oath on the playground when, you were in the third grade with your broker, that stuff happens, but relationships change. Things happen that were unforeseen and unexpected, to where if you take the opportunity and you don't expect somebody to say yes right away, but you position yourself as a resource and somebody who's credible and that might be able to help solve their problem if and when they have one, that's all I'm trying to accomplish. Because I understand and I can really appreciate. I mean, I've got clients that I would hope and appreciate the perspective that I just shared, that they would have that same kind of relationship
Yeah.
with me, where they
Yeah.
would, I bring so much value to the table in the way I advise them and give them guidance, that they just couldn't, and the way I connect them, the way I challenge them, the way I do things, that's different than perhaps how people traditionally think about insurance, that I bring so much value that they're not going to take a look any place else. But things happen. People move on, and unexpected events, they occur. And so being a voice of someone that has credibility is important. I haven't used my content in a ton that way, but what I've also found, to your point, and I think that there were some undertones of the points you just made, here, is people are people are also cowards in a lot of ways. And what I mean by that is, in the era of social media and armchair quarterbacks, and those that are willing to comment and disparage someone on social media, what I also know is that there are people who see content, I'm guilty of it, that I like, that I don't actually hit the like button.
Yeah.
And that I develop some sort of thought process of credibility in my mind about who that person is. And I know that because some of the videos and some of the other content that I posted, you may routinely get 15, 20, 30, 50 likes, something like that, a few comments. But it's uncanny the amount of people that reach out to me maybe weeks later, maybe months later, and said, "Man, I saw what you posted on
Yeah.
X. And I thought it was really valuable." And I look back through that post, they didn't like it, they didn't comment on it. So people see and people develop, heuristically, their thought process about who you are and your ability. I think it's Jeb Blunt who says these 5 questions. It may be fanatical prospecting or something like that. Do I like you? Do you listen to me? Do you make me feel important? Do you get me in my problems? And do I think that you can solve them? So those first couple,
Yeah.
do I like you, certainly can come across in a
Yeah.
video, that, right? So, and somebody's developing a thought process about who you are, and your ability to bring something to the table for them.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I couldn't agree more with that. So let's go to the next step then. I'm really curious if you don't mind to walk through your sales process a little bit. I think that would be super helpful for folks out there. So you've got the content rolling, you're calling outbound, using the content to build brand awareness, credibility. Then what does it look like when you get the initial meeting with the prospect? What's that meeting look like?
I like to call it, it's like it's an introductory meeting, but it's almost like, uh, what do attorneys call them? Discovery meetings.
Yeah. Yep.
That's all.
Totally.
That's all it is. And what I try to do is I actually try to talk as little about insurance as possible, and I want to be curious about their business.
Yep.
I know you're 100% squarely on board with this. Is that I can't be a great advisor to them unless I understand the problems that they have in their business. And so I want to know. I want to know a history lesson. One of the very first questions that I love to ask is, "Thanks for having me in. I can find as much as possible on your website and other outlets. Can you give me a history lesson? Where did the business start? Where is it today? And where are you hoping to go with it? And I stop there. I ask lots of questions about the business, and I'm trying to be really curious about the business for a lot of reasons. Okay. So the first is that again, I need to understand where they are today, where they've come from, and where they're headed to to figure out some of the other, deeper questions, or maybe deeper tangents that I need to go on from a an understanding perspective. Number two is I think that we are a little bit unique. I mean, most people have property casualty and benefits, most agencies or most firms do. We're a little unique where we've got P&C benefits, retirement plans, and then life insurance. And so, sometimes we get into a conversation where, again, I oddly enough, I always set my appointments on the premise of being completely agnostic to work with them in whatever capacity. I'm just trying to understand where their frustrations and concerns are, because you've been on them too. How many times do you go into an opportunity where property casualty is something that you're stonewalled? That's where you
Yep.
and that's where you and I sit. But knowing enough to be dangerous to understand that their health insurance renewal went up 50 points,
Yeah.
and they've been, fully insured, but they've grown from 75 to 125 employees, and they haven't thought about any kind of, hybrid models, or, captives, or other, or retirement plans. Everybody has to file a 5,500 for a 401k. What about the administrative costs and fees, and signing on as a co-fiduciary or life insurance, talking about buy sell and how they're funded, understanding how things work. So going back to your question about the standard that we're holding ourselves to as an advisor, I'm going in to do as much discovery on that person as possible and see where there's an opportunity, if there's an opportunity for us to be helpful to that business. And maybe the answer is no, but maybe the answer is I'm going to connect you to somebody who I know can solve a problem that you just shared with me that you didn't know was a problem,
Hmm.
but I identified it. And I want everybody to be successful. And so pointing them towards an outlet or a resource that can help solve a problem. So that's a short answer to the question, I think, a long, short
Yeah.
answer to the question. But it's a lot of discovery and being curious about the business. Like, I don't care about insurance because we're going to get there at some point, perhaps. The business and the curiosity about how it makes money, how it's going to transition, who the customers are they doing business overseas, how do tariffs impact the business, what does the what does the administration do, how has the insurance program grown, what's been your experience with insurance, have you thought about other creative and alternative risk financing solutions? I mean,
Hmm.
are you sick of paying premiums to where, all you get from an insurance carrier is a coffee mug and a pat on the back? Or are you looking to do things a little bit more creatively? That's
Yeah.
those are all questions that I'm trying to identify, and it's a lot to pack in for a 60-minute session, but usually they're fruitful conversations.
Yeah. Well, and I think, as you walk through that, it's looking for areas you can provide value versus just sell a product. And, when you think about using that term credibility again, but relationship and everything that you can build with that client, imagine going in there, they expect you to be talking about PNC insurance, or whatever, and you start to go down this conversation and you say, "Hey, it sounds like you might actually have a ton of opportunity in what you're doing on the benefits side. That clearly is a pain point for you because you can't find employees, you mentioned, and you guys are looking to grow and, whatever." And imagine you go out of that, and that's your recommendation, is that, maybe introduce them to somebody else in your team or an outside partner or whatever. And they find a ton of value in that because you solved that problem for them over the next, 3, 6 months, whatever. To your point, I guarantee that that's going to come back around to something in their business, PNC insurance, that maybe isn't on fire, but they're like, wow, if they can do that over here, I bet that they can have a similar model, or Casey's going to approach it on the same way on the PNC side. And that sometimes just becomes like a no brainer for them. And a lot of times there aren't fires on the PNC side. Like, as much as we want to find the people that are on fire because we think it's going to be an easy sell, like 90% of the time it's set up pretty well. It's not on fire. Like, there's good brokers out there that are doing a good job of servicing the account or whatever. And so it's finding ways to show them other value, show them how you work, show them how you approach their business so that they can see that you are looking at it differently than what their current relationship might be. And that they should give you a shot to go down that conversation further.
Yeah, I think that's right. And again, I'll mention his name because he's been so valuable to both of us, is Larry Linney. I
Yep.
mean, forever, we've worked with him for a number of years, and the one of many things that we've taken away from him is building branded processes,
Yeah.
building branded resources that you can't get anywhere else. You guys have them, right?
Yep. Yep.
Launch, great product. Think it's fantastic, because the reality is that people, and when I say people, I mean brokers. They call themselves brokers. They might have some of those things internally, perhaps they don't. But the holistic approach to helping someone manage risk in their business, maybe it's not distilled down into this one product that's tangible that you can only get by working with Oswald or Ella Brock Norris. You can't get it anywhere else.
Yep.
And so usually the other end of that process, we go through that first meeting and we identify, yeah, maybe maybe there's something that's worth looking into a little bit further. Maybe it's PNC, maybe it's benefits, whatever. And we've got branded processes that we've created to help somebody go from the start of a process to the end, and share with them an output for them to wrap their arms around and quantify how big of a problem is the problem. And is it problematic enough for me to disrupt a 30-year relationship? Ultimately, I've got to answer that question, because you go back to the comment, somebody's got to get fired
Yep.
for us to get hired. So are we bringing enough to the table to help them understand that the $15,000, again, I go back to that example, that they're paying somebody to do a job, is that sufficient? Do they feel like they're getting ROI out of that investment? Or are those dollars better repositioned in a partnership with an advisor that can help make them better as a business? That's a question that everybody's got to ultimately answer. And it's one, stare yourself squarely in the face in the mirror, and you got to really answer that. And I think that where we've had success over the years is being transparent, being really clear, and being completely objective, that we're not here. And you and I, both, can appreciate the approach of BOR, AOR kind of discussions. There's lots of heartburn amongst others out there about that kind of stuff, but I think it's the right one because it allows us to be objective.
Yep.
I'm not coming to you with a product. I'm not saying that this is going to solve your problems. What I am coming to you to say is, here are a bunch of areas that we've identified that if we were in the driver's seat, we would be helping you manage in a different way. And here are the tools that we can help you do that with. And here's how it correlates to risk in your business. Are you in or are you out? And if you're out, completely fine. That's your choice. But know that these are still problems that could cause your balance sheet disruption. So I think that's the hill that we die on as a firm, is helping to be really clear, really transparent with our observations, and letting someone make the business choice of whether, you know, as hard as it is, that business relationship they've got needs to be severed.
Yeah. Totally. I know it's funny on the BOR conversation. Everybody has a different perspective on it, but if you boil that down, one of the best reasons for the BOR is, uh, so not only it just puts an objective conversation around it, as long as it's being used the way that it should. I know it can be used shady and all this stuff, but um, think about if you go into a prospect that maybe you've got a bunch of markets for, but they're with the literal best market for general contractors or whatever, and you've learned about their business. You're like, man, they're in the best spot. Well, in order to win that business, are you going to go to a less ideal option for them, try to get a quote, try to convince them why they should move to you and this less ideal option for them because you just want to win the business? Or do you go, let's keep you in the best spot, and here's why we think we're differentiated, here's why we think you should hire us, we can use that tool, that carrier, which is the best option, and not put you in a worse position just so we can win the business? Because a lot of times we all know you could talk to the client about how this carrier might be better and they're a little bit cheaper or whatever. And the client may not understand all the nuance if you're not very objective and very upfront about it, right? And I don't know. We've gone that path because of a lot of those things that we never want to be in that position anyways. It's like we just want to say, here's how we think we can do a better job for you. To your point, here's what we've identified from problems you might be experiencing. We've agreed these are problems. Here's the tools, here's the action plans that we're going to take if you hire us to solve for those things. Do you want to do business? Um, and that's how we've approached it, very similar, but um I'd be curious to unpack that a bit. And how are you uncovering those things? So done the first meeting, you've learned about the business. How are you uncovering the things that you mentioned? Like, here's the problems that you identified, and then the risks in your business. Here's the tools. How are you knowing what to present to them, uncovering those things that are going to be meaningful to them?
I told you all the details, everybody else on here. I'd have to, crack some skulls, but no, I, I, I
Secret
we've got,
sauce.
yeah, right. We've got a process that we've developed internally, and like anybody else, we've developed resources and teams of people that help to triage risk in people's business. So one great example would be compliance and safety, especially within manufacturing and construction for that matter. We don't deal with it a lot in Ohio, workers' comp,
Yep.
but because, 'cause obviously we're monopolistic, but compliance and safety training, tracking of those trainings, that's a really big deal for a lot of people. And when we ask questions around that, typically maybe those things live in a spreadsheet, maybe they live in a shoebox, maybe they live, I don't know, somewhere else, but they're typically tethered together by just, somebody's brain. And so when we go through the diligence process, when we go through the discovery process, asking questions around how you manage in compliance and safety, big risk. And carriers, they want to know. They want to know
Yep.
how they want that story to be told in a way that gives them comfort, because for anybody that's listening, I'll say right now, the comfort of an underwriter is probably one of the most undertold importances about how insurance is priced accordingly, and the terms and conditions that are offered, and how your story is communicated to the marketplace with respects to how you're managing some of those things is critical. There's 75 or 80 boxes in underwriter checks when they get
Yep.
a submission coming across their desk, and it's not their job to come back of the boxes that weren't checked and ask about the things that you're doing for those. They underwrite to what they see. And so the importance is having someone who's got a process that can already help you identify those things, and help tell the story in its full authenticity to the marketplace, so somebody gains cover. So in terms of identifying the things that we want to include in the overall deliverable at the end, where we're having a discussion and somebody's either going to ultimately come to a place where they're going to hire us or not. I hate to oversimplify it, Elliot, but I think it's being thoughtful about the questions that are asked inside of some of those meetings, enough to listen for the problems that they don't know that they necessarily have, but because your ear is trained enough, you can identify maybe a hole that you can plug with the resource that you have internally, whether it's safety and compliance or contractual risk transfer, or you fill in the blank. Facility safety, big one.
Yep.
We talk about plastics and rubber in Ohio, and we're here close to the rubber city in Akron. That's running rampant, and it's a huge sense of disruption for a lot of people in terms of property insurance. So listening, actively listening for daily activities inside of somebody's business, and knowing how to identify something that could be wrong or that could be solved, and then deploying teams of people throughout the process. And it could be a few weeks, it could be a few months in between start and finish, and understanding how to plug and play certain resources that we've got internally, enough to be able to put a cohesive deliverable together at the end and share, here are the problems, here are the solutions, and here's the risk that it presents to your business. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah.
Getting too specific, I think that might address what you're asking for.
Totally. So, well, I mean, I know you guys have been thoughtful with it, and I think that's the most important thing. Like, everybody's going to have a little bit different process, but you figure out who you want to target, who you're going after, and then build that process to best align with that target
Well,
market.
yeah, and a lot of it too, you mentioned earlier. I think it's pretty hard it's pretty hard to get the core elements of somebody's insurance program wrong on the PNC side. I mean, you got cars, you own buildings, you make product, or you offer services. I mean, assuming that class codes are all correct and the rating basis and all that kind of stuff is somewhat accurate. And it's hard to get that stuff wrong.
Yeah.
Throughout our process, though, to your point about this carrier looks great and the terms and conditions look pretty good, it's usually the things that live on the fringes that cause real deep concern that people thought they had insurance for it. They really don't. I mean, there's courtrooms full of people across America and the world for that matter that thought they had insurance coverage for something that they really didn't.
Yep.
I had an opportunity one time we went through, and it's a family owned company, and they had a D&O policy in place, and they had a family exclusion on the D&O policy. So we go through this whole process, and we highlight. So you ask about things that we identify, and we can illuminate to somebody in this whole process. That was one of the observations that we made. Like, so you got a family-owned company, and you got this D&O exclusion for the family in there. What is that? Did you know about it? Was that a conscious choice?
Yeah.
Tell me why. And I just had like blank stares and crickets, and they had no idea that that was on there. And we were able to, we ended up taking over, be a broker of record at some point, shortly thereafter, and negotiating that exclusion out of there. But that's the stuff that we find.
Yeah.
Or, talk about manufacturing, because we're on that topic, is, what happens if your product doesn't work? What happens if, your widget goes in somebody else's widget? And even though through your QC process, you didn't think that anything was wrong, well, now there's a problem. And that person can't sell their product because your product didn't work. Well, there's nothing in the GL policy that's going to cover that. So even though you thought there was, how do you plan to address something like that? I know you've never had a QC issue, because that's what we all get told. Like
Yeah.
my QC, I've got such great quality control,
Mm.
never going to happen to me. Okay, well, we all have to have contingency plans. So tell me what your plan is for that. Well, typically those recalls and those kinds of processes are 6 and 7 figures, and so those are large disruptors to a balance sheet that many people don't have liquid assets
Oh
and
yeah.
cash and other assets to be able to cash in to pay for that problem. Somebody says you owe me money. So those are the things that we all have wicked smart people that are internal, but that can help to illuminate some of those kinds of issues and help people really quantify how those correlate to their balance sheet, and ultimately, what do they want to do about them?
Yeah. Well, that's great. That's great. Well, I think, man, we've been going for quite a while here. Is there anything on your mind, things that you want to make sure everybody out there knows about or thinks about as they're listening here?
I guess I would just charge anybody who's listening to this, whether you're a producer or whether this makes its way into other mainstream listening ears, is to think about insurance differently. There's a lot of disruption going on in the insurance world from a lot of different angles, not the least of which is, the wildfires in California and
Yep.
what people thought they had insurance for and they don't. And it's, I empathize, because I can't imagine, having a 30 or 40-year home that you raise your children
It's
in, all of a
terrible.
sudden for it to be reduced to nothing, and you actually get a small percentage of what it was actually worth to rebuild it. I mean, that's really difficult. But it's a two-way street. But as advisors, it's really important to hold yourself to that standard. And my sense is that if you're not going forward, you're going backwards. What I mean is, to be an advisor, you've got to constantly be engaged to understand the problems that people have, learn about the business, and become refined as to the value of the guidance that you can bring to somebody's table. I would charge to think people to think about insurance differently, about insurance advisors differently, um, and certainly for those that are buying insurance, to hold someone to a different standard, because in a lot of ways, insurance has become commoditized, and it's just a product that people buy. But if you think about it critically, an underwriter is exchanging a small sum of money for millions, potentially millions of dollars of payment or settlement on their balance sheet.
Yep.
So the critical element of comfort and the story that gets told in terms of its authenticity and the things that your advisor gives you guidance on that could impact you negatively, those are the things that you need to be thinking critically of. And a regular cadence with an advisor, if it's something that gets treated once per year and it's a transactional kind of event, it's probably time to really look in a different direction, or at least evaluate that partnership and validate if that's the right one for you.
Yep. No, that's great. Love that. Couldn't agree more. So this has been awesome, dude. I'm glad we did it again. And hopefully everybody out there took a lot out of it. And I think there's some tactical stuff in there that people can pull out that I know are working for you guys, and you guys have certainly perfected over time. So really appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. Appreciate you having me on again. It's always fun.
Yeah, try to stay warm.
Yeah. We're trying. We're that much closer to spring. I look at it, we're on the 17th today, so that means that we're only like, 30
Getting
plus
there.
days away from actual spring. So
Yeah, we're
that
getting
gives
there.
me pause for excitement.
Exactly. All right, cool, man. See
All
everybody
right, buddy.
next week, and thank you.